So why are we having this owners meeting? Well, we certainly sent out an email that had a lot of great information in it. So that's one way to communicate, but we really feel like we wanted to talk with the owners. We wanted to give people a chance to ask questions. We wanted to get a chance to also share additional information with all of you. So we're going to do a few things today as far as our agenda. We want to catch everybody up on sort of what's happened and where we are with everything. And we also wanted to keep things short enough that we can allow for questions. So we do have several board members who are going to talk about a variety of things. Grant's going to kind of talk about how did we get here to where we are right now. Anthony's going to share a little bit about what we've been doing with the CTA, some of our conversations and the meetings that we've had, what we can share outside of the negotiation process. Lee is going to talk a little bit about what's next. What are our next steps? Where are we headed after this, now that we've gotten to this point? And Sofia will kind of wrap us up a little bit with sort of the request to lean in and what kind of help we need and what we can use from all of our owners in contributing to this cooperatively owned food co-op that we're striving to build. So those are kind of the topics. We're hoping that we'll only spend about 5 minutes on each of those so that what we can do is spend the majority of the last half of the meeting talking to you, asking questions, answering questions, those types of things. So that's our plan. I am going to actually pass the baton over to Grant, and he's going to kick us off with the how we got here topic and talk to us a little bit about that.
Right. Thank you, Dana. And I will slightly repeat, Dana, just want to emphasize how fabulous it is that you guys are all here today. It is a super disconnected time, so we appreciate your time and your interest, and it's super great to see everybody. So thanks for being here. We did share news recently and wanted to take time with you now to walk you a little more granularly through how we got to that point. So that's the part I've got here this morning or this afternoon. So walking through the process a little bit. As you know, we signed a lease with the CTA, and so I'm going to kind of start there. And the things that happened after that point. We needed to survey the building. Literally, we didn't have, the CTA was unable to provide firm drawings that architects and designers could work from. So the site team, one of their first steps was to get somebody in there, a professional that draws a CAD drawing of the dimensions of the space so that the design work that moved forward could be based on the actual space instead of everybody eyeballing it. So that was one of the first steps. We worked with our site team, primarily worked with a couple of grocery consultants and an architect team to start the planning, right? So once we had the space, it was a tenable thing to move forward with paying those people to do the work of starting to design the store. So they began iterations of how to lay out in the space that we had. In the middle of that process, we had a period where we were having some difficulty working with our architect team, and we had to make a change in architects, which was unfortunate and cost us a few months. On the plus side, our site team was fabulous about working through that really quickly and finding somebody new that we really loved. And so, yes, we lost a little time, but we did the very best we could with rocketing that forward as much as possible. With them on board then, the iterations of the store design and the layout continued until in this last summer we were able to present to you and to the CTA the floor drawings that we felt had reached a point where they were solid and worth moving forward with. So you probably saw those site design drawings last summer. And what those allowed us to do was now take them to the folks who do construction and equipment speccing, and they could start then giving us more firm estimates. That previously in our business planning we had ballpark numbers for the cost of building out the store and for the cost of the equipment. Now with these design plans in place, which were close to being final, we were able to talk to those construction folks and get some actual very close to real and final numbers. So those costs came in, and they came in high. They were more expensive than we had budgeted for in our previous guesstimate planning. And so our response to that was, we need to reduce this, and how can we do so? And one of the things we pushed at was the idea of using the basement space entirely as it was drawn before. Those plans, if you remember them, involved fairly elaborate use of the basement as well as the first floor. And so we said, hey, we need to pull back from that basement build-out construction cost. Let's remove that or bring it way back to more simple and see what that does to our construction and equipment costs. So we went through that step. We got new pricing for those things. They were lower, of course. They were not, they were still high. They were still challenging numbers for us, but they were better. So the next step after that, then, that summer we were working on owner loan campaign, kind of at the same time that this design work was moving forward. This was our second campaign wrapping up in that summer, and as you maybe remember, it was exciting to have people participate and be part of our loan program, but we were definitely coming up short of our funding goal. The goal at the time when we launched our 2 owner loan campaigns was 1.8 million. We raised, which is fabulous from our owners, 600,000, but that's shy of our goal. So at the same time that we were not meeting our fundraising goal, our costs and things were tending to come in a little on the high side, almost, which was implying that our fundraising goal actually might be low. So we were challenged by that in our business planning. That fall, we were really excited to welcome a bunch of new board members. So the next sort of step, the next piece of our process was onboarding board members that fall. Some great new people came on. We reached a full board in the fall. And spent some of the time again in the fall with these new board members who, a couple of them were very savvy financially, working on our pro forma planning and pushing our numbers around. And we continued to struggle with the costs being high, and another piece of the cost that was coming in high was labor. So we have a, as you know, quirky triangular shaped building space. It's not the ideal grocery store shape. And one of the things that inefficiency causes is that the labor costs to run a store in that space will be inefficient, so we'll need more labor. That's been the assumption, that's what we've been working with. And so both equipment and construction costs as well as labor costs have been coming in high. And so by late fall, our primary grocery consultant and store designer person kind of said to us, hey, I think we need a second set of eyes on this. Let's get somebody else in here to look at this with me, because we're not quite reaching a design plan, a store plan that works and that is affordable. We agreed with her, and the first we could get those people to come visit us and do a site visit and discuss it with us was January 15th, and which was fairly quick. So they flew in and spent the day with us and looked over our plans and the construction plans and the shape of the building and all of that. Saw what we were working on, and they agreed with where she was coming from, which was that it is too expensive as planned to build in that site, in that location for us. The quirky shape, the staircase in the middle of it, pinching in the middle of it, various things were making that too inefficient a space. Coupled with the fact that we hadn't raised enough funds to move forward, things were looking weak. So checking my notes here. So having heard from those folks who are professional store designers and co-op general managers, and they know how to run a store and they know how to build one out, and hearing that they didn't feel it was tenable there, the board spent some time in analysis on our end, and we looked at three sort of categories. The operational concerns, which was what we were hearing from these consultants primarily. Our fundraising concerns, which we already knew about. We were having trouble raising the needed funds. And then thirdly, what we kind of call organizational capacity, the ability, we were losing board members, and the ability for our board and our volunteers, because this is a volunteer organization in large part yet, we looked at the ability of our team to keep moving this forward. And we felt weak at all three of those areas. And as a result, felt like that the project, as it was planned and understood at the time, was not viable in the Gerber building space. You need to understand that we did not love making that decision. It was extremely painful for all of us. It is the board's job to make decisions on behalf of the owners, to go through all this analysis and vetting and feasibility study work, and to know what all the pros and cons are and the costs and that sort of thing. But it doesn't make it fun to have to look at a site that we know we all want to be in and feel like we have to turn away from it. But that's where we were in February. So we scheduled a meeting with the CTA, our landlord, and our plan, what we did going into that meeting was to talk to them and say, hey, these are our concerns. We feel we need to get out of the lease and spend some time regrouping with our owners and figure out what to do next, but this isn't working. And we did meet and sat down with our aldermen and our Chamber of Commerce leads, who have, you should know, have been phenomenal. The aldermen and the Chamber of Commerce continue to be extremely supportive. They don't want to see us leave, but they certainly understand our challenges. And so they're behind us 100%, no matter which direction we as a co-op turn. So they've been really wonderful. So that's the arc of the things that were going on in the planning and feasibility process for that time period. And which takes me then to passing the baton to Anthony, who will talk to you a little bit now about what happened when we went in and met with the CTA.
All right. So as a tiny bit of background, the reason why I'm telling this story is because I won't go so far as to say that I'm Chicago Market's lawyer, but I am the head of our legal team. We do also have outside counsel who was assisting us during this time, pro bono counsel, who was discussing the possible avenues of negotiation with the CTA. And one thing Grant didn't spend a lot of time on was that there was an additional area of lack of feasibility. It wasn't really its own issue. It was more an issue of fundraising, which was the environmental problems. The building has some fairly serious moisture damage in the basement that, as Grant pointed out, we didn't get great drawings and great specs when we got the building. You know, we were told, as many of you watched on Wilson, as CTA took the building down to an empty shell and put it back together again, which you might imagine we were under the impression that they'd taken it down to an empty shell and put it back together again, which they had in the main, but there was some fairly serious water damage that was not immediately apparent when we took possession of the building, but that became apparent over time. As any of you who do anything with real estate know, that's generally the landlord's responsibility. And we had initially approached CTA and said, hey, it's the landlord's responsibility. We can't do anything until this water damage is repaired, both because of the possibility of structural damage in a historic building and because of the possible mold and other things. We don't want to have a food operation in a building with water problems. And there was some communications difficulties. It was not immediately apparent that CTA was going to pay for it, or at least that they were going to pay for it easily up front. And so that was another thing going into these conversations, is all the things Grant described to you, plus a possible, several $100,000 upfront outlay before we could begin construction, which, as you imagine, is not in our budget. So we went into the meeting with CTA fully prepared to withdraw from the lease. As Grant told you, we had voted as a board to withdraw from the lease. And we went to the meeting, just so you know the full story, we went to the meeting at the CTA's real estate representatives, which is whom we negotiate with. We do not negotiate directly with CTA. They have agents who work on their behalf. And the meeting was a completely unexpected turn. Lee, Grant, and I went, and we laid this out for them, and they were a bit shocked, as you might imagine, but at the same time, very, very amenable to trying to fix the problems. And they came back with an overwhelming desire for us to stay in the space, an overwhelming desire for the project to succeed, and so completely to our surprise, put forward a number of possible avenues by which they, through various changes in the lease terms and construction and things like that, could actually make it more likely and could affect some of those issues that Grant was talking about, be they timing, funding, all sorts of things, which once again, as Grant pointed out at the very beginning, I'm not going to go into in excruciating detail. If people have questions, we can talk around the edges. Because those negotiations are still ongoing, we have to be a little bit careful. But what I do want to emphasize is that we were pleasantly surprised about how committed they were to making this happen. And so we left that meeting saying, with them basically saying, give us a pitch, and tell us what you want and what we can do to make this project more successful. And so we had a little bit of an awkward moment going back to the board and saying, well, you guys, we thought we'd made this really difficult decision and this was how the meeting was going to go. And suddenly we have to come up with a pitch, which is not what we planned to be doing the week after that meeting. We planned to mostly be licking our wounds. And it turned out that we came up with such a pitch. And once again, I can talk more details if people have questions within the limits of the negotiation. But we came up with a pitch we'd sent out that pitch, and then the email you received, I don't remember the exact date, but recently, was after that pitch had been sent, but before a response had been received. And so we were in a little bit of limbo saying, well, we know they have a spirit of wanting to work with us, but we haven't actually gotten a response back from them. We got the response back from them late last week. And once again, without going into too many of the details, because we haven't gotten a deal firmed up, or as we'll discuss in this meeting, we don't know if we can firm a deal up. It was, once again, overwhelmingly positive. Things we did not expect to get, things we expected they would try to negotiate down, they did not. And once again, the spirit that I want to emphasize was an overwhelming willingness to work with us and help us out and say, if there's other things you want to talk about, we'll talk about them. If there's other needs you might have, let's go through them. And so I think Grant, Lee, and I, and then when we reported to the board, the rest of the board came out of that, at least from that side of the situation, with a very positive feeling that, gosh, we actually have landlord partners here that want to make this project work. Now, I want to emphasize, as we emphasized in the email, and as you'll hear from people after I'm going to stop talking, that does not mean we are like out of the woods and golden. But what it does mean is that there is a foundation for the possibility of continuing a successful project that's actually maybe more successful and on better terms than the project would have been previously. So I think that is all I need to share from the sort of landlord meeting perspective, which means I'm actually going to turn it over to Lee to talk about what our next steps are and what we hope your next steps are going to be moving forward.
And Lee, before you start, I wanted to also just say, if anybody is thinking of any questions that you have, please don't hesitate to throw them in the chat after we have the board members kind of do their agenda items. Then we'll make sure we're able to get to them. But if you don't want to forget your question, feel free to throw it in the chat. Lee?
Thanks, Dana. Thanks, everybody, for being here. We appreciate the interest and the support for your coming out. So as you heard from Anthony, CTA is really working hard to give us the additional time that we need to get the store built out. So what I want to talk about is, assuming that we get to a successful negotiation, and that's not a guarantee, but we're both working at it, and I think it's fair to say it's going well. What else do we need to do, assuming that's successful, to actually get the store open? There's 3 areas, and Grant talked about these: the operations, our organizational capacity, and funding to get the store to happen. So there's time needed, obviously, to build it out. So that's what the lease negotiations with CTA have the potential to bring us. Operationally, what we have to do is find a way that the labor required to run the store day to day, especially at the beginning, is reduced from what the original store plan and program originally looked like. So we're planning to work with the co-op consultants and pull in some new folks to look at how do we reduce the overall store program so that we can make it work and get the store to run operationally so that it can make enough money to survive for the first couple of years. Organizational capacity, we're back down to 6 board members. I'm happy to report that as a board, we are functioning as the smoothest functioning board we have had in a while, but we're small, and we've had a bunch of volunteers who've supported us over time, and some of them we've still kept engaged, but we need to ramp them back up. So we're working on revitalizing the volunteer team. We have someone who's stepped forward to help lead that team, which will get it off the board's direct plate. Obviously, the board will stay involved. And funding. Even if we get rid of all of the other issues, we still need money to build the store out. Some of that can come from a bank loan, but a huge amount of it has to come from the organization. So we'll look at what can we do to the store program to make the labor work. It's not free for us to leave. So if we work with the co-op consultants and can't find a way, We're likely to have to pay a termination fee to CTA, and obviously we'd have to start over with a site search and new design, and probably bits of the store program would be reusable, but there's a significant cost if we can't make the location work. We're optimistic. We are moving forward to figure out how we make it work, and that's the mindset that the board has. In spite of having gotten to the earlier decision that we thought we couldn't make it work, with the breathing room that we think CTA is going to get us, we're pretty optimistic that we can find a way to make this work. It is trickier to get all this done, obviously, with a pandemic going on. That has an impact on some of the consultants and what they're having to do with co-ops that are already open. And I mentioned that this may mean that the store program as we first open is not quite as expansive and doesn't have everything that we were hoping to have at the beginning. That's fairly normal for co-ops to open with a smaller program and then to increase that program over time as the store becomes profitable. So that's where we're trying to go next. And I'll turn it over to Sofia to talk about the part where we need your help to make all of that happen.
So some of the things that we're looking for are, they're not new. They're things that we've asked before, but this project, we want to emphasize that it won't happen unless we get funding. So as Grant has mentioned in the past, we've run 2 campaigns. With the second campaign, we hired a capital campaign consultant, and we've reached out to a broad range of organizations, not to mention the majority of our owners. So we would be looking to kickstart that effort again. But what changes this time is that we've started accepting donations in a way that they haven't accepted before. Donations are now a much more common fundraising mechanism in the capital campaign space. So that would be a change that allows grant giving and donation giving organizations that weren't able to participate before. So we will be accepting donations, and we're also working with consultants to lower the overall project cost. So that should help with the overall campaign goals. But what we really need are creative solutions from you, from our owners. So of course, we were asking that owners donate, that you loan during the next campaign, but we're also asking, who can you connect us with? What kinds of individuals, what kinds of organizations, what kinds of grants are you familiar with? There's other co-ops in the country that are actually running their capital campaigns right now, but that are also receiving upwards to 6 grants for their project. So, this is an effort for all of us, not us, the board, but us, the owners of Chicago Market. And so we're looking for those creative ideas of how to connect all of our communities, both within Chicago Market and beyond, to come up with those connections for how we can raise the capital. Besides funding, of course, we're also looking for your time and your skills. We have a wide range of volunteer needs, and please stay tuned for additional communication listing those out. As was mentioned before, we do have a volunteer coordinator that's going to be rallying those efforts. So it kind of goes both ways. We will be sending out communications around the skills that we're looking for, but if you can also just let us know, shoot us a message with what skills or ideas you could offer, and we would be happy to match them with our needs. We've already had several interesting ideas come up, and we're working on ways of how to connect those with our existing resources and experiences to push them through. So the 6 of us can can come up with ideas. And of course, we have the help of our co-op consultants from around the country that have experience opening up co-ops of various sizes in various communities, especially during the time of the pandemic. We're hearing some very inspiring stories of fundraising coming out of various communities. But we really can't do this without all of our owners coming together and either connecting us with the with this think tank or from a fiscal perspective.
Thanks, Sophia. So we have had some great questions coming in. So thank you, and keep them coming, because the rest of this meeting is basically trying to answer questions, trying to get some more thoughts, brainstorming, any other things like that we might be able to do together. So I wanted to start with the first question that came in. We'll just kind of like go down the chat in the order that I've received them. And I think, Anthony, this one might end up heading your way, because Larry is asking us if the negotiations hinge on future CTA budgets. With the reduced ridership that we're seeing, we know that there's all of this, what's next for the CTA, for us. Karen kind of added on to that about how the pandemic has impacted maybe even our own assumptions around fundraising. So Sophia, I might have you, or Grant, even you, talk a little bit more to that one about, I know what Oshkosh, for example, is doing and what we've been hearing from co-ops around the country. So let's start with Anthony and the future CTA budget negotiation. Anything you can share with us about that?
For sure. So the way I'm going to answer this is about the types of things that we are getting or asking for from CTA. Luckily, this is one of those answers where the question is positive, where there's good news. And the good news is that we had no indication whatsoever that these have any contingencies on that. And in fact, that they're moving forward with negotiations and lease signing, and a lease signing with terms in it that are favorable to us. One of the reasons why that's possible is because without going into too many details, none of the things that we're asking for or that are being offered involves CTA writing us a check, right? It's not dependent on their cash inflow, not directly dependent on their cash. It's more things like timing delays, ways that they can deal with the environmental problems, all things that are incredibly important to us, but that do not require CTA to, go to the CTA board and write $1 million check, right? That's not the sort of thing we're talking about, which is good, because it means that things aren't particularly affected by future CTA budgets. These are not issues that are going to really change that much. Also, one thing to keep in mind regarding future CTA budgets is CTA's, CTA, this is a revenue generator for CTA. And so they, as a commercial landlord, want this space to be filled with a rent-paying tenant. And so they're willing to do a lot. And as some of you may know, commercial leases are very long. They're 10-year leases or longer, depending on how things get negotiated. And so they want to nail down a rent-paying tenant for as long a term as possible, especially in an uncertain economic time. So it's and the last thing I'll say is that they've made it very clear to us that there is also a cost to them, just like there's a cost to us in leaving if we choose to leave. There's a cost to them in finding a new tenant for a somewhat complicated, large space. So at the end of the day, I actually don't anticipate there being much of a problem when it comes to CTA's future budgets or the pandemic. Now, there's other pandemic-related issues that I'm certainly going to want to let people speak to. But as far as the negotiation and the lease terms, I actually don't anticipate it being a problem. The last thing I'll say to anticipate a question is some people may be thinking, gosh, based on what you've said to us in public, you're supposed to be paying rent real soon. How's that going to work with the pandemic and the fact that you're not bringing in income right now? And one of the things the CTA has made very clear to us is that they are willing to work with us keeping the pandemic and its influences in mind, be that changing our timeline because the consultants can't get here fast enough and are literally not able to come and look at the building until later in the process, or making sure that we don't have large rent bills due when we haven't come to a new agreement yet. All those things that are pandemic related, CTA has made very clear that they understand, that they are willing to be as flexible as they can conceivably be, and that they are dealing with that, as you might imagine, in an enormous number of different areas with different kinds of tenants and different kinds of things, and that they get it, right? So that's sort of the bottom line I want to put regarding sort of pandemic stuff and CTA is they get it, and they have made it very clear that they understand the challenges and that they're going to make it work to the best extent that they can.
Thank you, Anthony. Hopefully, Larry, I saw a thumbs up from you that answers some of your question, but related and staying on that pandemic theme, Grant, I know you were actually on one of our most recent peer co-op calls with Oshkosh and some of the information that came out of that co-op, which actually is not too far from the Chicagoland area. So one in the suburban that we have, and some of the things that they're doing. And I was wondering if you could speak to, because this is true, Karen, you asked this question, this is true for all of us on the board. We're like, can we even do any fundraising right now? I mean, this is crazy. Why would we even think of asking people for money right now? Like, how is this even going to be feasible? And we've kind of been surprised with some of the answers. So Grant, can you share some of the things that we've learned?
Sure. There's no question that it's a pretty sensitive topic to ask people for money right now, because for many, that's just not going to be something that fits in their reality. We are hearing from co-ops that are in their capital campaigns or just about to start maybe a third phase, that they're finishing or moving ahead with a fair degree of success despite this. Obviously, it shifts who in your owner base can loan, but it doesn't mean no one can. You have to be cautious, careful, and sensitive to people's situations, but there is still some ability to do that with people. We would not have to have next round of loans tomorrow. So one thing we can do is start to have the conversations about these sources of capital and perhaps get pledges from people, but push down the calendar a little bit. Not forever, but there's a possibility of sort of thinking about when this capital campaign really happens. Another thing I'll say is it is very early days, and there's part of the answer to your question about can you raise funds in this environment is we don't actually know. It's a whole world of unknowns right now during this COVID thing. And so to be perfectly honest, there is some question there. But it's our job right now to do the best we can to test the waters and see if the funding can be out there down the calendar a little bit, so that we all as a board and as a community of owners can feel comfortable moving ahead. So difficult question to answer. While we're on funding, let me just jump to Karen's second question, because it's similar, sort of related, and it's easy to answer, which is about the TIF funding. And yes, we have about $1.5 million in our funding stack, as they call it, in our plan for funding the store. And that TIF funding is still very much in our business planning. We don't see that changing. Well, let me say this. Up until COVID, we did not see that changing. We haven't heard anything to the contrary yet. But it's a fair question as to whether TIF funding is going to shrink as a response to COVID. But our best understanding at this point is not.
And I think sort of related to that, Grant, is that's also why we're trying to pursue what Sofia was talking about with some of the grants that might be available. We are up against a challenge, even though Uptown has certain economic challenges for a fair number of residents in that community. We aren't considered in a food desert because of the other options that are there. So there are some things that we can qualify for and other things that we can't. So for us, it's just been a matter of wading through what all's out there. I know that Bob has been working on some of the grants as well as the TIF focus as well. And one of the other challenges that TIF does provide is timing as well. If we are to go for TIF, that is an extended process. So it is 12 months. And while it is a significant chunk of our money, in the budget and what we're hoping to receive, it is also something that will take time to get. And if it's not something that we end up getting, that just puts even more of an emphasis on the organization itself, the co-op and the co-op owners, making up that difference. So that is something when we were looking at all of the funding issues, each one of these things, not just the labor cost or the operational cost or the, cost of equipment and construction, but all these different funding sources. It's very complicated with all of that. So again, something that we're trying to kind of keep all those plates spinning and looking at all of them, but it's challenging and it's a little difficult to think through all of that. Another question that we had from Larry had to do with the design challenges of the first floor and if we can successfully manage those. So Grant, I guess I might throw this to you as well, simply because of some of the conversations that we've had around differences in design and operational challenges that you spoke to earlier. Can you talk a little bit about things that we're considering when it comes to the design challenges and what we're hoping to do to address those?
Sure. What we hope to do, put it really briefly, is sit down with store designers and have a fresh conversation with them that says, hey, we have this previous plan and this previous way of thinking, and we had to have all the bells and whistles didn't fit and the labor costs were too high. So you tell us what we can make fit in here and that can be successful and achieve and this is important, achieve the sales goals that our market study tells us we should be able to achieve, right? So we set up a business pro forma plan that expects a certain amount of income from sales. We have to build a store that produces that income level. So when you start taking away programming and simplifying things, which we think we'll need to do, we also have to remember that those things have to be the things that we keep have to be strong sources of revenue and make the store still work financially. So the simple answer, I think, is that we're going to sit down with those consultants and say, help us pare this back. What does a simpler store look like, or a phased store look like? One of the challenges is we've all along felt we had to have, because it seems so obvious, have two entryways, two doors, right? One off to the parking lot with cars and presumed larger basket size, so good revenue that way. And the other one is that fabulous door at the corner of Wilson Broadway. So all along our design has been locked into maintaining those two doors. But what that does for labor is you have to staff both sets of checkouts. Yep. What it also does to floor space is you have to build two sets of checkouts, and that takes away sales floor. There's a possible loss and theft and a need for security at each of those doors. So all those things add up in having two doors. So it's time for us now to at least put the idea of one door on the table and talk about that with our consultants. What do we do that's simpler? Sounds crazy to have one door instead of two, but do we want to be open? And so I think the answer is we're going to sit down with consultants with a fresh and more open perspective to change.
And Steve was sort of commenting also in the chat for folks that want to read his entire message, but the gist of it is, why not start even smaller? Why not just do a buying club? Why are we not just like selling out of our backdoor farmer stuff that can come in? And I do want to share, Steve, that we've actually been considering a lot of all of those different ideas and would welcome additional participation in some of those conversations. We had originally proposed to all of our owners that we were going to do a full service grocery store. So we were talking about a butcher shop, we were talking about a bakery, we were talking about a lot of those things. And when you start getting not just the equipment costs in, but the labor costs involved in all of those, that's when this whole phasing in of things has really become far more important to us. It was certainly things we were looking at before, but it's become critical to being able to come up with a program that would be successful. So one of the ways we as a board have been kind of trying to narrow our focus, I guess, is to say, what are our values? We talk about the local food system. We talk about supporting local farmers and local producers. We talk about supporting the local economy and being transparent and sustainable, and a lot of the sustainability efforts around having a lot of bulk and things like that. We're saying, well, what's more important? Is it better based on our values and what people among our owners are saying they really want, to have a bigger bulk department and phase in something that might have to do with bakery or butcher shop or those types of things. So we're trying to also go back to what the owners have expressed to us and what we know are part of our value system and what we're trying to do from an overarching mission and vision perspective as an organization, to let that also guide us. What's operationally going to save us some money and make it easier for us to operate. And definitely when it comes to things like a meat department, that was probably the highest labor cost, and there wasn't even an insurity from the grocery consultants that we've talked to that we could keep the shelves stocked. with the amount of labor that we could afford. So those are all things that then hinge on the design and the layout and what goes where and how much space we dedicate to different things. Because each one of those departments that's on that floor plan is going to generate a different amount of income and a different cost, whether that's equipment or labor costs. So those are some of the other things I kind of wanted to just add on. That we're sharing about that. And speaking of grocery consultants, we've had some questions in here, kind of scrolling through to locate them again, about learning from other co-ops. Adam was asking, to what extent do we feel like we've got good comparables in an urban center, for one? That's challenging. We're one of the only co-ops in the city of Chicago. The only other one is Dill Pickle and Sugar Beet out in Oak Park. So we certainly are looking to them. And they're doing some amazing things that hopefully you've noticed on our social channels we've been promoting. But we can certainly talk a little bit more to that. And I don't know, Lee, did you want to answer a little bit about like the other co-ops that we're looking at and some of what we're trying to do as far as make comparisons or other things that they're doing?
We've talked to general managers and board members at a number of other co-ops. There are relatively few urban co-ops in the kind of situation we're in. One of the questions that came up kind of talked to this in the why are we having problems with getting engagement and funding and being able to get the numbers of owners that we're really looking for. And the answer is there aren't a lot of comparable co-ops for us to look at. The majority model of co-ops are either in college towns or they're in towns with not a grocery desert, but where there aren't a whole lot of choices. So there aren't multiple Whole Foods and Trader Joe's and other local alternatives. And Chicago people are fairly busy. So this is one of our constant challenges, is that we're different, which is part of what's kind of behind if you've got ideas of how we improve and grow the community, we're really open and looking for them.
And it's been surprising, even with the craziness of COVID and everything going on, we've still had people joining, and we've been really putting no effort towards owner growth at this time. But we also know that kind of to the point that we've heard with some of the folks that are out there fundraising, there seems to be an interest in going back to community, going back to local, and the transparency and everything related to our food system right now, I think is kind of being highlighted by everything going on. Adam also asked in another question, learning from other co-ops, he had also asked about, sorry, trying to read it here, grocery trends in a COVID world, and are we considering the whole move to online and that sort of thing. That's actually one of the things we were looking at when we were thinking about the two-door scenario. Do we have our back door be just a curbside pickup? And that's strictly what that back door is used for. Is that a way that we can kind of have, we already have a fairly decent online presence, and we don't even have our physical store open. So is there a way that we can leverage that? To that point, there are a lot of other co-ops that are in the stage 2B/stage 3 level of development, which is where we consider ourselves in terms of where we are in getting a store built and the process you go through building a co-op. And we have peer calls, and we also have an entire series of calls that the FCI Food Cooperative Initiative, they put together a series called Co-Video series, and it's a whole video series where we're basically on Zoom calls, and there are multiple every week, and we are trying to get somebody from our board on every single one of those. We're taking copious notes, and we're sharing out those notes, and we have requirements to read those notes before we have our next board meetings, to really look at how are co-ops doing this? What are they doing now? For example, Sugar Beet out in Oak Park, they were doing senior hours. They were doing some of the various protections on protecting their cashiers from various different exposure to things. And they were doing a lot of things when it comes to minimizing amount of people in the store, passing out gloves, wiping down carts and things at the front of the store as people are entering. So they've been doing a lot of different things, and we've been paying really close attention to what we're seeing people do out there. But even the co-ops that are physically operating right now out in the world have no idea what it's going to look like as shelter in place orders are lifted, as things are becoming more new normal. That's one of the reasons why we're also a little challenged with some of the consultants that we've been working with. One of the consultants that was like totally on board was actually going to start within a week or so. We were hoping to start with them on re-looking at our floor plan and that first floor. And what ended up happening was they said, we've got to help existing co-ops that are our partners right now in what this new normal and preparing for the future. And we're trying to figure that out with the current co-ops. So we can't quite help startup co-ops quite yet because you're not even operating. So we really need to focus on these other guys. So we've seen that happen with some of our consultants, which is also what's made it a bit of a challenge, and which is why I think there was another question in here related to what specifically was our pitch to the CTA. A lot of it had to do with timing. And I'm thinking Anthony may have already answered some of that question in terms of what we've asked the CTA for. But Anthony, I'll ask you if you can expand a little bit more on what we're asking for with the CTA. I think we did have a question come up in the chat and an answer about the moisture. So that is something that we want to make sure we share verbally as well.
Yeah, so I'll go through a couple of those things to try to address a couple of them. One of them I will say for the moisture, I apologize if I didn't make this clear. The moisture issue, assuming we move forward with the lease, is going to be taken care of. There's discussion of what's the best way to take care of it that's most advantageous for us and most advantageous for CTA. If we move forward, the answer is it's going to be taken care of and it's their responsibility. So that issue is taken care of, which is a huge burden off of our shoulders financially. And that's very, very good. That changes our game plan a little bit. As Grant's talked about, it doesn't change everything, but it changes a lot. Once again, without going into too many details on the pitch, because like I said, we're still in negotiations, the largest one that makes the biggest difference, as Dana pointed out, was time, and time on many levels. So time is a big deal for us because, especially with fundraising and operational concerns, we don't want to be up against a deadline and not meet it. We want to really make sure that before we start rolling or paying rent and going, we are in place and have all the things in place. And they've been very flexible with giving us significant additional time. So that's a really good thing.
There's been a lot of great conversation and back and forth and questions coming in on the chat. So I'm trying to look through and get some additional ideas. I know, Michelle, you had said that the conclusion about comparables is we kind of need to take things with a grain of salt. And yeah, that's true. We're in such a unique environment that we need to kind of chart our own path a little bit with this. We can certainly look to Dill Pickle. They are the only other co-op in our city with our type of community and that sort of thing. So we can certainly look to them, but that's, a sample of one. So we are looking at a lot of other co-ops, but some of them also have a lot more longevity behind them than we do, which is also kind of a unique thing. And Sabrina had mentioned as a new owner that she was concerned with crime in the area and no parking lot. So I did want to just make sure, Sabrina, that you've picked up in some of the commentary that we do have a parking lot in the back. And it's definitely something that we would have, as far as that was kind of a gimme for us. And one thing that was really strong in our site requirements was having parking. The challenge is really just, can people walk around? And that's what we're looking at, is other ways to make it easier to get from the parking lot into the building. So ideas and thoughts around that certainly welcome. Scanning through some of the other things, and thank you, Steve, for some of your Shy Commons information. We will definitely be looking into that, and Sabrina reaching out for some of your Brick Meets Click kind of information that you have there. James had asked about donations and non-tax deductible, and there was also a comment earlier about Giving Tuesday, which is typically in the fall, has been bumped up to May 5th. We actually have a webinar that is being hosted on Giving Tuesday concepts and getting ready for it on May 5th. That we are going to, or at least I'm as a board member going to try and attend that particular webinar, but we are not a nonprofit. So that's another kind of issue that we sometimes come up against when we're looking at different funding options. We're not a nonprofit. So one of the ways that the donations can be tax deductible and kind of have some of the nonprofit benefits is that we are working with, and those of you that are more attuned to this, correct me if I'm wrong, but we're working with basically like a financial agent, an organization that is a nonprofit that will be receiving all of the donations. We do pay a small fee to that particular organization for this fund that they are building of donations. And then all those donations basically get filtered through to us as the recipient of the grant from that particular organization. I'm looking for nods of confirmation from Bob and Grant and Lee on my explanation of that. So that's one of the ways that we can do some nonprofit donation like things. So that's why we're opening up to donations. It's something that not a lot of co-ops have done. So again, kind of to Michelle's point of what comparables can we look at? We're really, looking at whoever is doing any version of that and trying to learn what we can and see how it would apply to us.
I just wanted to ask something, and people can maybe put something in the chat. And that is, a couple folks have said this was helpful. Is this something that we should think about doing in some form on a periodic basis, given that we're not going to be getting together in person for a while?
As we're wrapping up here, I thought I'd offer a little bit of a glimmer of hope from what we've heard from our consultants in other projects that are opening up soon. And it's that from a stock market perspective, we of course don't know the long-term effects of stock volatility, but, and this is anecdotal, but for people who have money outside the stock market and want to put it somewhere in the community, this is a great resource for that. Values-based giving is something that those with fiscal resources at this point is increasing. And to hit on something that Joe said earlier, the co-op is looking really, co-ops in general are looking really attractive right now with our ability to not only serve people in the community, but to support our local economy, support the farmers. The co-ops and local food resources, whether it's a CSA, whether it's a store like Local Foods, they're able to deliver food to us much better than big box stores. So there really is a benefit for a store like us that not only helps the community, helps the local economy, but does so in a way that instills hope.
And I'll add one quick thing to that, Sophia, to join on your hopefulness. My other job is journalism and writing about food. And as many of you know, sadly, over the last 5 or 6 years, interest in CSAs and traffic at farmers markets has actually been dropping. And Grant can talk about this in much more detail, but it's actually been going down, partially because of various, the trend might be waning. There's lots of reasons. You can read lots of articles about it on the internet. One of the things that this current situation has done, as Sophia's pointed out, in addition to the moral and ethical and political aspects of making us more concerned about those things, is it's had a very large material effect on those things, even in the Chicagoland area. CSAs are reporting, I've talked to several different farmers in the last 2 weeks, CSIs are reporting 50, 60, 100% increases in subscriptions. Innovative ways of getting farm food to market are spreading up all over the place. And by the way, a pitch for our database we put together on our website of those kinds of local food options. So one of the possible silver linings of this, as Sophia said, not just the idea that local food is continuing to be important, but that these options are actually being consumed at a larger rate again, and it's being made material again. And I think that's important and something that it's good to get that part of the conversation going, because it had, and I think we all know, I think it had dropped off a little bit in the last couple of years.
And on that note, unless I hear anything otherwise from the board members, what I think I'm going to go ahead and do is I'm going to, as the host, do an unmute all, since we have a small enough group on here. And everyone has the option, should you want to see the message on your screen, to unmute yourself at this point. You're welcome to do so. And I wanted to just say thank you for your participation. I believe based on the 1,845 owners that we have, this was probably less than 2% of our owners in terms of participation. So we will definitely try and offer more of these. We will all make sure that we're staying abreast with newsletters and with social media posts and different things like that. If you're not on our Facebook owners page and you are on that platform, please join us there so we can share information and talk together as owners and brainstorm things. Definitely open to conversations, and some of you have reached out with a variety of different things. We're capturing that in the chat so that we'll hopefully be able to follow back up with some of those ideas. But any other comments or questions or things before we sort of wrap up? Any other thoughts people wanted to share?
Hi, this is Michelle with Adam. For me, first, thank you to the board for putting this together and for sharing what you're able to share when you're able to share it. I think that's really important. And I'm also heartened. I mean, at the time we joined as members, we were impressed with the digital community and virtual community that we already have. And I think we all have seen in the past 6 weeks how much of a strength that is. So I think between going back to our core values and leveraging the digital strength we have and leveraging the trends that Anthony was talking about, I think there will be lots of paths forward. So thank you for doing this.
Thank you. It's good to hear when something that you put a lot of effort and time towards. It's nice to hear that. So we appreciate that, Michelle.
I have a question for you left. So speaking of that, I'm just spitballing. This comes out of left field. None of the board have heard this yet. Can you imagine?
Did I mute you, Grant?
Yeah. Can you guys imagine useful Zoom chats on behalf of Chicago Market that owners lead instead of the board leads? I'm not exactly sure what that means, where that goes, but speaking back to the capacity problem, it's hard when everything we do, even doing another one of these, we don't have to have all 6 board members on this all the time, but it takes board members. And I'm wondering if there would be any can anybody imagine utility for you people bringing the community together in a stronger way than just being us all the time?
I'd be willing to host a Zoom, and I do have a Zoom Pro account, host a Zoom to talk about the buying club idea.
We are having some ballpark conversations about, what to do short term, perhaps to use the space to help farmers, that kind of thing. So that's related to that. So we should keep talking.
One other possible idea. So I'm a personal chef and caterer. I'm very much trying to pivot and figuring out what I'm doing for my business. But one small thing that came up for me is hosting a fundraiser for an organization that I've been close to for a while now. So I'm actually hosting a virtual cooking class for them. And trying to raise money for them. And I'm not sure if that's something that Chicago Market wants to wade into, but just the possibility of hosting a cooking class fundraiser for Chicago Market and trying to get owners bought into that. I'd be happy to do something like that. I don't do virtual cooking classes very often, so still trying to obviously figure out what that looks like and how to keep people engaged, but just throwing the idea out there.
Well, Charles, I was just gonna say thank you, first of all, for all that you're doing for all the organizations that are passionate to you. I think that's one of the also hopeful things I've seen kind of come out of this. And we have been also looking at what are ways that we can support our business owners and support, you know, the local initiatives that are going on, which is why we felt our community is one of our strongest things that we have going for us right now. And that's why that shop local pages kind of came up on the website and that sort of thing. But I think at this point, we are open to all kinds of ideas and thoughts and suggestions. And the biggest thing I want to do with this huge online community and even people that aren't owners that are just passionate about what Chicago Market is trying to do, but haven't come on board as owners yet, how do we keep them engaged and how do we connect with them in a way that's meaningful and not just a connecting for the sake of, you know, trying to push the market, because it's not about that when it comes to a co-op. It's about our community. You know, our tagline is local, connected, yours, and that really speaks to me when it comes to how we need to connect. So I think we're definitely open to ideas. Grant, you had some thoughts around doing video stuff with some of our business owners and things like that as well.
Yeah, let's let Joe in.
Yeah, well, just as we were talking, it strikes me, would it be possible to have kind of a virtual farmers market? Are there merchants and purveyors we worked with that are still trying to sell stuff that may be able to do so via delivery or mail? And maybe could we set up a Zoom session where they set up what amounts to being virtual booths, and we give them each maybe 5 minutes to pitch something and a URL where people can go buy something and just generate some business for them online?
Where's the oh,
the applause.
I'm
the
looking
applause.
for the clap thing big time. So there's a lot of virtual farmers market things happening, and our shop local pages are that in a way too. But your idea is totally different than anything I've seen, which is keep people connected to their farmers and let them talk with them a few minutes before they order. Very interesting. I love it.
One of the ideas that have come from some of the other co-op things is they were creating bingo cards with various different businesses or organizations that are important to the co-op, whether they're their business owners or whether they're local farmers they're supporting. And like maybe it's, you know, buy something from this person or do something for that or contribute here or, you know, whatever, participate in different things. And so it's a bingo card and you check off, and then there's some sort of a prize that people get after they've done so many things. And it's just an engagement tactic that some of the other co-ops that we've talked to have been doing. And so, yeah, we're trying to like think broad, think big, but also get the participation so that it's not just the board trying to execute on a lot of these things too, so.
Yeah. And along those lines, maybe another idea, people were talking about, you know, grocery stores post-COVID. Why not, you know, you could probably do kind of a virtual town hall, bring in 2 or 3 experts, and which is something that as an owner, but is also somebody that is sort of a foodie, I'm very curious about myself. So I would be able to sit in, although one of the ironies is because I teach, I'm on Zoom so much I'm cramping.
Yeah.
But that would be another way to engage owners on the issues, and maybe even generate, and then maybe even have them share the Zoom link, and suddenly you know, we can maybe get 1 or 2 more owners out of it.
Yeah. One of the farm groups that I've been purchasing farm goods from, it's a kind of collaborative that they're all pulling together with, and they've been doing, a chef at a local restaurant that also buys from them has been doing recipes. I haven't gotten to watch the 2 videos that I got yesterday, but I've been like loving the videos that the local farmers are doing about the crops that they're harvesting right now and like what they're packing up. I've seen a lot of that on social media. Also at home right now because their restaurants are closed, doing different things. So it's been really kind of neat to see that interconnection. Yeah. What else? Any other comments, ideas, suggestions, thoughts?
When I think about, Grant, to your question of kind of how to do more with less effort, and Dana, your comment about all the content that's being created, some of those things might not need to be actually created. They just might need to be us asking our owners to either link to or post on the Chicago Market page to amplify the content already and to build conversations that they're already having.
That's a great point. And I will fully admit that when I'm on our Chicago Market public page specifically, and I look for who's liked different posts that we've put out there, It's typically the board members and a couple of our engaged volunteers that I see like those things. So yeah, any chance you guys have to, again, like those things and pass it along, please, please. We could use that for sure.
Yeah, and I would add, to the extent that all you guys, since we have your attention, you can share things in things like the owner group to show engagement and get other people chatting, and brag about what local farm you just brought your CSA from, and post about it, and see where other people are shopping, to get that conversation going and get people reconnected, because we do need that.
I think some of the best conversations I've seen in some of our social media channels have been, just random owner asking other owners a question, or other people that are fans of Chicago Market, what to do about something. And those conversations can really be meaningful and re-engage people in a way that they weren't before. So conversation doesn't stop here. As we've heard from you guys, we'll certainly see if we can kind of institute doing these on a little bit more regular basis. We have our board meetings, we have that are open to owners. We also have our newsletter, different things like that. So reach out to us in those ways. There's also the board at chicagomarket.coop if you think of anything after the fact. Again, we'll try and do our due diligence and follow up on some of the thoughts and ideas that have come through our chat conversation on this call. But thank you. Thank you so much for being part of this community. Thank you so much for being interested, being passionate. This community is what it's all about, and this is something we're really, really learning and bringing to the forefront with everything going on. So stay connected, stay local, stay healthy, stay at home.